Welcome to Just Say This, the place to get all the help you need for the birds and bees talks. I'm your host, Amy Lang. Just a quick reminder, this show is for grown-ups because I'll be swearing. There'll be lots of swears, and then I'll also be talking about grown-up sex. I can guarantee that your kids do not want to listen to this, and they really don't want to listen to it with you. You've been warned. Do you have a question for me? Please give me a call. The phone number is 206-926-1522, 206-926-1522, and I will answer on the show. And if you have a funny sex talk story, please call in those as well, 206-926-1522. Thanks. Do you know about the podcast Believed? It's about that asshole. That's not even the right word for him. I don't have a word. Larry Nassar, who molested, raped, sexually abused, I don't know how many hundreds of girls who were gymnasts and otherwise, I am certain. If he had access, he got at them. Anyway, I encourage you to listen to it. It is really hard. Of course, if you have a sexual abuse history, I would maybe recommend not, but you know your limit of tolerance. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I'm talking about consent, answering a couple questions about consent. And I just think that the biggest thing when it comes to kids being sexually abused, especially by somebody like him in a position of power, is that you have to believe them. If your child says, this person is doing this to me, believe them. They don't lie. In Believed, I'm not going to blow everything, but one of the women they interview, she was family friends. Her family was friends with Larry. I don't even think I should call him that. He doesn't deserve a name. With that shithead. And he would do things like hang out with the kids in the basement. That is not normal. When you go over to your friend's house, do you go hang out with the kids in the basement for fun? That's not a thing. So that's called a red flag. So he would do that. He would play games with them. He molested her multiple times right under the parents' nose. And if you know anything about him, that's what he was doing. He was molesting girls while he was working on them, giving them physical therapy or something. I can't even remember, even though I just, watched the hearings and whatnot. Anyway, right under their nose. And finally, she told them what was happening, and they did not believe her. They were furious with her for saying such a thing. They couldn't believe that shithead would do something like that. This is so common. This happens all the time. When a well-respected person in a community is fucking with kids, people don't believe the kids. Anyway, she told. They didn't believe her. It was so bad, they were so awful, that they made her apologize to him for saying such a thing. It caused a rift between her and her parents. So finally, she just took it all back and said it didn't really happen. This was before he was able to get at hundreds and hundreds of girls. And of course, it comes around later that she's the one that basically breaks the case, as it were. Anyway, I just had to talk about this. I think that the biggest reason we have so much sexual abuse in our culture and in the world is because of adults. We don't pay attention to our intuition. We trust the wrong people. People who molest kids have red flags all over the place, sometimes. But if you're not thinking about what's normal, what's not, just in terms of adult behavior, you might miss it. Like her parents trusted him. And so they thought he could never do something like that. They didn't think, what a fucking weirdo. Who hangs out with kids like that? That is weird. I know, you might love kids. I love kids. I might make that decision now and again to hang out with kids. But as a regular part of me going over to my friend's house who has younger kids, no, not a thing. I like children. I don't like them that much. I get it. You might be thinking, if you were abused yourself, you may be thinking, my parents never knew, and that is absolutely true. Parents never know. But I bet if you could put a camera on the circumstance, your parents could have made sense of some things in terms of your behavior, in terms of that other person's behavior. What happens with these folks is that they are in some kind of position of power. They're charming, they're friendly, they're attractive. There was a guy in Seattle who was a teacher at an elementary school. Everybody loved him. He was the DJ at the mom's parties. He was always part of things. He was super fun. And he ran into a girl that had been in his class. So she was probably, I think, in middle or high school. And he asked her if she wanted to volunteer in his classroom. And she said yes. And so she just showed up and would volunteer in his classroom. She started getting, I think, Facebook messages from a stranger asking questions and saying things like, "You're so beautiful, you're so hot, you're my Lolita, do you know who Lolita is?" And saying these sexually suggestive things. She figured out it was this teacher and, of course, thank God, told her parents because they were open and askable, and this was a weird thing, came back that it was him. He's bye-bye, and he was charming. And who would have thunk that he would have done something like this? And now I'm making y'all paranoid about every human being that you're around. I don't want you to be paranoid. I just want you to be aware. And I want you to believe your kids. If they tell you somebody messed with them, they messed with them. Or if you have intuition about somebody. I had a mom one time call me because her husband's friend was coming over to hang out and she just got the willies from him. He gave her the creeps. She did not want him anywhere near her kids, and she thought that she was making stuff up. Our intuition is rarely wrong. It was not making stuff up. There's something off about this guy. So we talked about how she could strategize to keep him away from her kids if he was at her house. And also, her husband didn't think there was anything wrong with him, so she had to manage him as well. Anyway, this is awful. Larry Nassar is awful. Listening to these amazing gymnasts and athletes talk about this horrific experience with Larry, and then in the aftermath where when they finally were investigating, it took them 14 fucking months after it was very clear that he had molested them, and they still dragged their feet. Anyway, this is one of those things that I'm not very nice about. I think it's understandable that I'm not nice about, but I also get that it is really confusing. Again, that's mostly because these people, they show up like healthy, normal humans, and they're not. Let me give you another couple tips. I should probably have an expert on again. I think I already had Christy Keating on. You could go find that. If I were a good podcaster, I'd tell you in podcast episode number 17, but I can't tell you that. Anyway, so some red flags in adults are attention to kids in a way that feels just weird and wrong, offering to run errands for usually single moms they're targeted like this. So you have a friend and it's usually a guy and they're like, "Hey, I'll go babysit your kids while you go to the grocery store." So a little too good to be true opportunity to access your kids. That person who's after your kids will actually groom the adults. That's the showing up as super cool and fun and all that stuff. Like Larry had that gal's parents groomed up one side and down the other. So it's not just the child. It's always someone known to the child. Stranger danger crap, that's just does not really happen. It's almost like, I can't even remember the stats, like 99% of the time, it's someone who's known to the child in some way, which again increases that trust. If your kiddo acts weird around that person, seems afraid or cringy or runs screaming from the room, then that should tell you that something is going on. They're not just being silly. If Uncle Creepy is always going in for a hug and your child is like recoiling and Uncle Creepy's not reading the signs, something's wrong there. Anyway, so blah, 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 blah. I'm just kind of rambling on, but hey, you're used to me rambling on. Anyway, in the show notes, there are going to be some good resources for you to learn more about this and to keep your kids safer and to heighten your awareness. I will put the link to the Believed podcast is there. I highly recommend. I realize this is a really challenging topic and, take care of yourself. If you have questions or need more support and help, you can always reach out to me, Amy at birdsandbeesandkids.com, as you all know. And yeah, hang in there, heighten your awareness. If you have someone in your life that's a grown person, including adolescents, that gives you the creeps, pay attention. Okay, on with the show.
Hello, my daughter's name is Aria. She is 6.5 years old now. I got a text message from one of her friend's moms one evening, and she basically wanted to let me know that she was talking with her son, who's a friend of our daughter's, and that Lincoln told her that Aria kissed Motaz at school. and she just wanted me to be aware of it. I'm not really sure how to approach it with our daughter, Aria. We are a very loving and affectionate family. We kiss, we hug, we snuggle, and she and Motaz seem to be very close friends, and they have decided that they are going to get married. Motaz speaks to his parents about it, and Aria tells us about it all the time, but she never really said anything about kissing. There is a part of me that isn't very surprised, but at the same time, I also worry that, kissing a boy at this age is a bit early. So I'm hoping that you can share some wisdom about how to appropriately handle this with her. And I really appreciate your work and your time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hate it when y'all get texts from another parent saying your kid did something like kissing their kid or another kid. Super duper uncomfortable. And at 6, this is a completely developmentally appropriate move. These two are getting married. It's very exciting. They're committed to each other. They love each other in their 6-year-old way. And of course, there's some kissing. And because when people are in love and getting married, there's some kissing. Now, I need you to put your kid hat on and take your adult hat off, because when we think about that kind of behavior, kissing, we think about it like it's grown-up stuff. But for these folks, these young folks, these little bitty folks, it's just play. It's part of their imagining that they're being married, imagining that they're married, and that they're getting married, and kissing is part of that. Now, my guess is, I haven't witnessed it, nobody else has from the sounds of things, that there's probably no tongue involved. It's probably just play. And what should happen is that you should talk to your kiddo and say, hey, I heard that y'all are, I know you love him. I know you're getting married. That's the plan. But just want to let you know that when kids, your age are having, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it's not okay to do anything other than hold hands or maybe even hug, because kissing is grown-up stuff. It's for later in life. And when people see kids playing games like that, they get uncomfortable, and kids can even get in trouble. You are not in trouble with me. I understand what's going on here, but the rule is no kissing. And then the other thing I highly recommend when young people are having grand romances like this is that you help them understand that one of the fundamental parts of being in a romantic relationship is friendship. Push on the friendship aspects of their relationship. So ask things like, what do you like about him? What's your favorite thing to do? What do you want to do? Like when you imagine yourselves married, what does that look like? What kinds of things are you going to do together? And then, of course, you have to ask questions about what do you not like, or when they have a play date. Just a side note, why did we start fucking saying play date? Anyway, it's got the word date in it. Is that encouraging young people to date earlier than they should? I'm sorry. It's been a while since I did any of this, as y'all may have noticed. Anyway, back at it. When they have a play date, ask what was the best part of your play date? What was the worst part of your play date? That's going to help you gather intel. The last thing is this. Because this, technically it's called sexual play. Don't freak out. Because you know that the sex play is happening, when those two are together, they should not have any private time. I would basically have them under a watchful eye whenever they're together. Kids are sneaky, so they may go off behind a tree and whatever, but I think between those two things of saying, hey, no kissing, here's why, not safe, grown-up thing, and then keeping an eye out, that will help reduce the chance of that happening. And I think you might remember that you maybe had a love interest when you were 6. I certainly did. Ronnie Hansen. I had a crush on him for so long. I believe I've talked about him before. Anyway, he grew up to be what appears to be an asshole. I could be wrong. I'm judgmental, as you all know. Anyway, so yeah, focus on friendship, talk about consent, and then wait it out. These early romances don't often last, although I will tell you this. My husband's aunt, she and her husband, who died this year, have been together since they were 6 or 7. And they just that is how their life evolved. That is an inordinately long time. They're in their 80s. Anyway, so sometimes romance lasts forever, but most of the time it doesn't. I thought this would be a good time for some book suggestions. And I think I've probably suggested these before, but you know what? It's always good to hear them again. Okay, consent books and body boundary books. So for little tiny people, like under 4 or so, it's My Body is my perennial favorite. Yeah, it's kind of cheesy looking, but the content is really great. It's not creepy, it's not scary, and it sends a really good message. If you have a kiddo that can read to your younger kiddos, have them do that because they're going to get it. Everyone's going to get the same message, right? The next book is called I Can Play It Safe. It's more about general body safety and boundaries, but it's also really, really good. And the last one is called Consent for Kids. It's new-ish. I think it just came out in the last year or so, year plus. Or maybe it came out in like 2018 and I can't remember because of the fucking pandemic. It's for kids who are probably 8 and older. And if you are familiar with the Consent is Like Tea video, it's written by that same person. I love it. It's a little kind of higher level thinking in some ways. So you can read it with your younger kids, but don't expect them to like get it in the same way that your 8, 9, 10-year-old will. Super love it. As for yourself, if you are a victim of or a survivor of sexual abuse, the book Courage to Heal is really great. And then if you are interested in more like body safety and being safe out in the world, Gavin de Becker's book Protecting the Gift is also really good. It's probably a little dated in some ways, but it has such good information about how to be smart out in the world for both adults and children. All right, all of them are on my bookstore page, birdsandbeesandkids.com. You can find them there. And there are more. Those are just the handful that I can think of off the top of my head. There are tons more. Sorry, I just have to editorialize. What a surprise. One of the things that when I look at kids about sexual abuse, books about sexual abuse prevention for kids, one of my things is that if it makes me, I was not sexually abused, if it upsets me when I'm reading a book for kids, then it's not a good book for kids. So there's some out there that are just creepy and too graphic, and that's just me. So I don't recommend books that upset me. But there's lots of them. Go check them out. You can find them and just read them all yourself first. If they feel adult-like or they give you the total willies, then do not read them to your kids.
Hi, I have a 7-year-old boy who is very fun and very energetic. And we often play with kids in the neighborhood and from school, and we have read Consent for Kids. And my question pertains to when it comes to bodily touching with other kids and when it comes to interacting with other kids, what are the rules around consent when they're playing on a trampoline and jumping and then they're, bumping into each other, or they're playing tag and tagging each other, and do they touch different body parts? Can they not, especially when it's between boys and girls? And I get confused with what the messaging is on when you can and can't touch other people and when you can't touch other people, especially when it comes to forms of traditional play that kids have that entail touching. So how to navigate that and to talk about that in relation to consent when those types of games, it seems as if consent is assumed already just by playing the game. So any help on that front when it comes to just regular, I don't know if regular is the right word, but when it comes to interactions with kids in play and touch is typically entailed, how to advise your child to approach those in an appropriate way. Thanks so much.
I've probably said this before, but I'm going to say it again. Consent. Consent means to agree to something. And I think the word consent, when kids hear it, I think it's a little esoteric or a little challenging for them to understand. So I'm just going to suggest that you use the word agree along with the word consent so they finally understand what consent means. It's a good thing we're talking about consent. We've never talked about consent in the way that we do now, so it is terrific. And most of the time, sort of the end goal of the consent conversations are to keep kids safe from sexual abuse, or to keep kids safe from being engaging in sexual behavior that they're not into. So consent, of course, is awesome, but it has this, we think about it in terms of sexual consent. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, yeah, you're right. It's implicit. When you're playing tag, the goal of tag is to touch the other person, as y'all may recall from playing tag when you were a smaller human. So implied in tag, of course, somebody's going to get touched. Now, where they're going to get touched? On the butt? That would probably be a no-go because your butt's a private part of your body. With your kiddos, I would just say, hey, you know what? When you're playing these games, when you're playing tag, when you're jumping on the trampoline and messing around with each other, because there's pushing and hand holding and, all that stuff. For those of you who are able to get on a trampoline without peeing your pants, you probably experienced that firsthand. Anyway, so there's some touching and hugging and bumping and pushing sometimes, and that again is implied consent. And again, you want to say, look, no touching butts, no touching privates. Duh. It's not funny to hit someone or push someone in their private parts. It's absolutely not okay or safe. And also, if someone does something and touches you in any way that you don't like, you need to tell them, hey, knock it off. Stop it. I don't want you touching me that way. And if that's hard for you as a kiddo, then, tell them that they should let you know that that's happening so you can help them. Now, touching. Again, consent. Everybody needs to agree to be touched, but games are different. Playing is a little different. If you're wrestling, there's touching happening. Kids wrestle. It's actually developmentally important for them to wrestle. So if you have been intervening every time your kids are wrestling with each other, let them have at it. And of course, rules. If somebody's getting hurt, if there are privates involved, then the rule is that needs to stop. Anyway, so let your kids know. Always say, hey, no, don't stop. If someone's hurting them or touching them in any way that they don't like, let them know that, like when you play tag, it's okay to have people touch you because that's an implied agreement. They're not going to understand implied. So it's like everybody understands that that's how the game is going to be played. And I think you mentioned the book Consent for Kids, or maybe that was somebody I was having a quickie with. Doesn't that sound terrible? It's a consultation. Consent for Kids is terrific. You can find it on my website. It's birdsandbeesandkids.com. There's another great book called I Can Play It Safe, which I think would be a really good one as well because it's more around, guess what? Play. Anyway, good on you for thinking about this. Good on you for picking it apart. I think it's really helpful for our listeners. That's it for this week. Thanks to everyone who's been calling in. The number's 206-926-1522, so please leave me a message if you have a question or a tale from the trenches. And thank you to Melanie Smith, my producer, and to Rolf, who wrote the Birds and Bees and Kids theme song.